Michigan Sports Media Network podcast. We are back on a lovely Wednesday for you folks to talk some sports. Now, not too much has been going on, as we know, in the world of sports since last week, because the NBA draft, the NHL draft, NBA free agency, NHL free agency have come and gone for the most part. There's still a little bit, to be talked about, which we will during the show, so stay tuned for that. However, to start the show, we are going to talk about some NBA news because that's kind of what's fresh on everyone's mind as of now. So, just to kind of jump into that real quick, um, the Pistons are not getting Malik Monk, and we're not getting John Collins, as everyone should know by now. Okay, a lot of Pistons fans were, I want to say head over heels about the fact of the thought of getting one of those guys. Now, personally, I would have loved Malik Monk. I do think John Collins wasn't a great move for us right now because he's on a 1 year deal worth, $27 million. So it would have been good in terms of like his fit on the team, on the court at least, but his fit in terms of financials and future stuff I just didn't love. Now Malik Monk was another conversation because I personally was like I adored the thought of adding Malik Monk to this team because he's pretty much exactly what we needed. I'm not really sure what happened, why the Pistons were not able to get him, but unfortunately they didn't make it work. So with that being said, everyone can kind of put their excitement to the side because the Pistons got a trade exception, and they swapped second round picks. So the Pistons got a second round pick next year for the Kings. In turn, gave up a 2029 second round pick. So didn't really move the needle. I mean, I know a lot of people now are upset, which I do understand because you're thinking you're going to get a starter level or at least high level, backup type, and we got neither. So I will say it's going to be okay. We got a 14.3 million trade exception, I believe. So that's going to open up some stuff for the Pistons, as time goes on in this season. I would not be surprised if this trade deadline we make a move and we trade Tobias Harris and we put that trade exception in a pick for somebody who can actually move the needle here. I know I haven't been the highest on Tobias Harris, as we all know who have watched the show or been a part of the show. When we signed him, I wasn't that happy about it. I didn't hate it, but the age, the money, and everything, I just didn't love it. Now, I am happy to eat a little bit of crow. He had some really great stretches in the regular season and the playoffs. I think he was our second highest scorer in game one against the Knicks. So, he kind of did his thing. However, I would not be mad if we moved him. And I think getting that trade exception along with a guy like Tobias Harris, we're talking that's like $38 million that we could then bring in. I don't know who it would be off the top of my head. I'd rather not get into those conversations right now, simply because that's a lot to unpack, and we are so early or late, I guess, in the season. You could look at it either way, that it's kind of pointless, I think, to even talk about it because it's most likely that all of the big trades in the NBA have come and gone. Really, all the big free agents have come and gone as well. As we've talked about on the show before, there's still a handful of guys available that I think could help the Pistons. However, and this is a good segue into our next topic. Trajan Langdon, his comments at the press conference didn't really bode well for the Pistons fans who wanted to get Malik Monk in the first place. If you were that type where you're like, oh, this would be great, he kind of, washed away any possibilities of us really making a move right now. I do get where he's coming from. Don't get me wrong. This is a very young roster. We're counting on Jaden Ivey and Asor Thompson and Jalen Duren and all those guys and Marcus Sasser, those kind of guys to take the next step. The problem is when you really put all your eggs in that basket and then they don't, you're not in a great spot. Okay. Fortunately, however, Langdon has done a good job of adding some veteran guys this offseason that will help, with Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert they will kind of, take Malik Beasley, Dennis Schroeder, and Tim Hardaway Jr.'s, role. They will be able to do that just fine. And I personally am kind of lukewarm, I guess, on the Pistons, contention or contending chances this upcoming season because do I think they got worse? No, not really. But I didn't think they were a contender last year. I mean, I said it on the show many times, and those watching will probably remember this, but when we played the Knicks, I had the Knicks in six, man, and it didn't even take that long. So it's just one of those things that, yes, we are still a good team. However, do I think it's enough to take us over the top? Not really. Now, to play devil's advocate in a small way would be, do we really need to right now? I mean, you see everybody around the NBA. The Rockets just traded for Kevin Durant. They added a plethora of good role players as well throughout this free agency. And they kind of, reformatted their team. You saw the Celtics, they shipped a lot of guys out with Jason Tatum's injury. The Pacers, in a similar fashion, they know they're not going to win next year, so they kind of kicked the can. And they didn't let Miles Turner walk, but he did leave in free agency. So I think it's one of those times where you see teams like the Hawks and the Rockets that are kind of trying to pounce on the situations that, Boston is going through with the second apron, which we will get into a little bit later, talk about a little bit more in depth, I guess, a little bit later. But that second apron is really killing teams right now. And I kind of get the slow develop as you go approach because of that second apron, because you don't really want to go out and the only player I can really think of right now is, Michael Porter Jr. You don't want to go make a trade for Michael Porter Jr. if you're the Pistons because he's getting $40 million over the next 3 seasons. And if he doesn't work out, you're going to have to basically give him away. So it's like we got a lot of moving parts and things going on. So just kind of take that into consideration. If you were one of the people who wanted Malik Monk badly and are upset, because I'm in that same boat, trust me. However, the Pistons are not, like the Hawks. They're not like the Rockets right now. They're not quite ready to go and make that big splash. But like I said, I would not be surprised if they made some moves at the trade deadline, especially with that trade exception. That really does make a big difference. And I mean, think about it this way. They don't even really have to trade anybody depending, they would have to trade a player, but they don't have to trade anyone starter level right now. They could use, a Marcus Sasser and that trade exception and a second round pick and go get somebody who's making $20 million a year. That's a possibility too. So just keep that in mind as, the season kind of goes. And also, Trajan Langdon made a very good point with, Jaden Ivey. He's like, when Jaden Ivey returns, we got Dennis Schroeder after he went down. So Jaden Ivey is going to kind of step in and take that backup point guard minutes as well. So everybody can kind of calm down and relax and understand, no, the Pistons are probably not winning the NBA Finals next year, but I'll tell you, they're definitely not going to be the last team in the NBA. So we can rest our laurels on that. And I think a lot of Pistons fans, coming into the season would have been happy if you told them, look, man, we're going to lose in the first round, but we're going to make the playoffs. They'd be like, well, shit, that's more than I could ask for, really. At that rate, they had 14 wins the year before. You're sitting there going, I'll take 20 wins, and then we made the playoffs. So I think everyone should kind of calm down a little bit and breathe. And it's similar to the Lions. It's like our window is nowhere near closed, guys. So now with that being said, yeah, exactly. It's cracked open right now because we are just getting started. But with that being said, is there anything you have to add to that before we move on to our next NBA topic?
No, not necessarily. Excuse me. I just wanted to add, since you touched on it, that I've seen a lot of Pistons fans, I will say, be impatient for some reason. And like you said, we just came off of a 17-win year, a 14-win year, and then we triple it and make the playoffs. And I'm like, this is year one of the new GM and the new head coach with Bickerstaff and Langdon. And I wish other teams and other teams' fans in this city would have that sense of urgency as well. I feel like the wrong fan base is pushing for the wrong coach and GM to get it done right now. But
Red Wings.
yep. I wasn't gonna prod that deep, but yeah. I mean, the coaches, to be fair, the coach was fine once we got the new coach for the Wings. But
True.
I'm like, Eiserman's in year 6, and everyone's like, give him time. And Langdon's in year 1 after making playoffs, and people were like, what the hell, man? You didn't, go out and get SGA? Like, what the fuck was he supposed to do? But whatever. I'll digress on that. But I do find it interesting that like we've had the best season in a long, long time for the Pistons, and people are seemingly upset. I know we didn't do anything massive in free agency. As a Michigan fan, I like that we got Levert and Duncan Robinson. Um, I don't know how much better they make the team as a whole. It is, in my personal opinion, a nice replacement for Beasley and Tim Hardaway. But we have such a young core. We can wait a year or two and let these guys develop. We might get better than last season just by natural development of our players. Like Ron Holland is super young. The whole team is super young. So I'm not too worried about going on to the future.
Yeah, for sure. And, to kind of wrap this up, I forgot to mention a few things before we do move on. Langdon did mention as well that Asar Thompson apparently is looking a lot better and bigger already this offseason. So looks like he's trying to add some mass. So, guys, he might, call me crazy, he might be playing some more 4 next year. And that might be why he's adding mass, and also why we're not going as hard for another 4 as people think we should. Just, that's my own 2 cents on that. And then, really, at the end of the day, his whole thing was about the long-term vision, the long-term goals. And I kind of like to hear that from a guy in his second year with a team like this, because it's like, okay, you get it. You're not going to go mortgage the future for, we're not going to be the frickin' the New Jersey Nets when they traded for, Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett when they were like 38 years old. Thank God we're not doing that shit. So, with that being said, though, moving on to our NBA piece here, there are a lot of teams, like we mentioned before, who are dealing with this second apron, and they're dealing with it a little bit differently around the league, right? Like, Boston, they punted on the season. They full on said, Jason Tatum tore his Achilles. We're not going to be good next year. We're just going to call it and, try to lower our tax bill so we're not spending $150 million extra just to have the team we have when they don't even have a chance to win. Which it does seem like a lot of NBA front office people are a little upset about the new CBA. Because like Brad Stevens, for instance, the Celtics GM slash president of basketball operations, said in a press conference the other day, they asked him, so why did you trade, Porzingis, and why did you trade Drew Holiday? And he goes, it's the second apron. That's it. It's the only reason. He was like, I would have loved to keep these guys around and keep them together so that Jason could, come back with the same team, but it's literally impossible with the new CBA. So, it's just like, I can see how it might be a little frustrating, as a GM who has been used to being able to build a team a certain way for a decade, and you've been doing this for a while, and it just kind of changes. I can see how it'd be frustrating, but as a fan, right, I think it's good for the NBA, personally, because last 2 seasons, right, I personally, and I don't know, maybe a lot of people would disagree with this, but I thought the Celtics had it in the bag. I was like, with their how deep their team is, they have a player for every situation at every position. It just felt like there was nobody to beat them. And I mean, they won it the first year, and then this past season they obviously didn't. So to me, though, it did feel like they were like the obvious team to win, and I'm not saying they were as good, but it's similar to like the Kevin Durant Golden State Warriors, where back in those days you were just like, yep, Golden State's going to win every single season until Kevin Durant leaves or someone gets injured, and that's just what it was. We aren't going to see that anymore in this NBA with this new CBA, and I kind of like it because we're also seeing a lot more parity in general, right? Where, we've got teams that are the sixth seed who make it to the conference finals, or the Pacers, for instance, were a four seed, made it all the way to the finals just because of, how deep their team was. They didn't have, a freaking Luka Doncic or a SGA on their team. But what they had was a team that played well. Don't get me wrong, they had stars, but there was no number one, just superstar player. And, Tyrese and Pascal Siakam kind of handed that back and forth, which in today's NBA, point being, today's NBA, you're going to see a lot more like college game, I think, where you're going to see a lot more like deferring. Like, it's not about ISO ball, it's about what is the best play and how can we score, and I'm just happy because I have always been wanting this basketball to be this way in the NBA. And it seems like we're starting to see that a lot more. And what will happen is teams like Detroit will have a better chance at getting free agents because teams like the Knicks or Boston or the Lakers can't afford to just go and get the best player. Like, oh, we have LeBron and Luka, let's go sign, one of the best free agents too. Like, you cannot do that anymore unless you want to pay, double your cap, which no owner wants to do, even if it means winning a championship, unfortunately. So that's kind of my spiel on the second apron and how it's going to affect the future. I kind of like it because you're going to see a lot more moves made, whether it be free agency, sign-in trades. Like, that's why we saw that Kevin Durant, James, I don't know if you heard about this, but there was a league record-breaking trade with 7 teams involved where, Kevin Durant went to the Rockets and this guy went here and that guy went there. They did that because of this new CBA. So we'll also see a lot more like sign-and-trade deals as well. So just something to keep an eye on and, kind of, think about it a little bit as we go because it does help, a team like the Pistons who are looking to build. Now, we have, I would say, a new NBA upon us with the new CBA, with all the new moves, and just kind of players moving. I think we're going to see more player movement than we've ever seen. Like, I think we're going to see, teams at the trade deadline who are, let's say they're a little bit over the luxury tax. They're going to say, look, man, we're not going to make the playoffs this year. Let's just try to ship one of these guys out and save us some cash. And I think we're going to see that way more often in this new NBA. So with that being said, though, to wrap the NBA segment up, let's talk about some free agents that are still available. Number one, we have Jonathan Kuminga, which not number one on the list, but just number one for what we're talking about right now. Jonathan Kuminga has had a lot of, conversations around where he is going to end up. It does not look like it's going to be Golden State. We heard the Kings. I've heard the Bucks, and a couple other teams as well. It's something to keep an eye on because it will likely be a sign and trade situation. And it's likely that, Kuminga gets paid pretty heftily. However, can't really say the same for the next guy we're going to talk about, which is Josh Giddey. Okay, it sounds like the Bulls are not very interested in paying him $30 million a year. It sounds like they want to keep that number around that 2025 mark at most. And it sounds like Giddey is not going for it. And it sounds like Giddey is most likely to play on his 1 year, 12.5-ish $million exception, which would then make him unrestricted free agent next year, so he is free to sign wherever he wants. That would kind of be an odd situation, I think. You're foregoing, $10 million, $15 million just so you can get more money maybe the next year. Still don't know if somebody would give it to you. So it's a big gamble you're taking. And we see Cam Thomas, who the ex-Brooklyn Net, going through a similar situation in Brooklyn. Doesn't sound like they want to pay him what he's asking for. And he's just going to kind of play on his exception or sign elsewhere. And then with that being said, the last two are very similar in terms of, their fit and how it's going to work on teams. Russell Westbrook and Damian Lillard, okay? Russell Westbrook is a guy who is my favorite player of all time, okay? Call me crazy. I love the guy. He's the reason I'm an OKC fan, so it's like, That's just kind of how it goes for me. But I would personally love him in Detroit, and not just because he's my favorite player, which it would be awesome to buy a Westbrook Pistons jersey. I'm not going to lie to you, but most importantly, I think he fits this team really well because he's like that veteran enforcer. He's going to bring that just tenacity off the bench, that aggressiveness. He's going to rebound, he's going to pass, he's going to steal, he's going to score, he's going to do whatever you need him to do to win. Okay? And we saw him in Denver last year be a huge part of their ability to, make it. I wouldn't say super deep in the playoffs because we did beat them in the second round, but their ability, especially in the regular season, to win games. I know a lot of people will agree that the Nuggets don't have the greatest roster currently, and Russell Westbrook was really able to help them out. So I would love Westbrook in Detroit. However, it does sound like teams like Milwaukee could be interested in him. There's a handful like the Rockets or the Wizards that also could be interested. We'll kind of see how that goes. I'm surprised he's still not signed. Sounds like he could still go back to Denver, but the odds on that are, getting smaller by the day. And then, of course, Dame Lillard, which is in his own right, his own situation because he is coming off of a torn Achilles. So the Warriors have been a team that's linked to him, and I think that makes a ton of sense because if you get him back in the playoffs and the Warriors have Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry and Dame Lillard coming off the bench, that's going to be scary. Okay. And I don't even care if we see, prime Dame Lillard or not. If Dame Lillard is still half of what he used to be, that's scary. Okay. That backcourt could be nasty with him and Steph. So that is my favorite fit for, uh, um, uh, Dame Lillard
Lillard.
as of now. Yeah. So that's my favorite fit for him. And then now that'll wrap up our NBA segment. There's not a whole ton going on that we haven't talked about before. Okay, so we got just the basics here. Basically, the NBA has stalled out a little bit, and it's going to kind of be like the NFL the last few weeks or months, where the first week or two is a lot of shit going on, and then after that, there's really not a lot. So stay tuned. I'm sure the moves will come, but we'll see when. But with that being said, we will now move on to the other piece or other half of the offseason, which is the Red Wings. So, James, the floor is yours to give us your Red Wings update.
Yeah, thanks, Chase. Not too much going on with the Red Wings, like you said to start off the show. The free agency and draft flurry of news very much settled at this point, but there have been, I'll say, weak reports of potential trades involving the Wings. And I only say weak because they came from reliable sources, and national sources. Now, I don't have sources, but just for any confusion out there. But there was a pretty big talking point on a few players about 3 to 4 days ago, obviously between shows, and I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to talk about this. And since then, I have not heard their names brought up once since. So I want to be like, oh, cool. Like they were former. Oh my gosh. Don't take a week off, people. They were saying like, hey, the Wings are having active conversations with Pittsburgh for oh my God, his name just spaced my name. Carlson. And I'm like, that sounds great. Like we need help at the blue line tremendously. Now, to be fair, he is an offensive defenseman and defense, which we need probably at this point more than anything, is his weak point as a defenseman, which is potentially weird to hear if you're not used to NHL, because there's offensive defensemen who like to push forward from the blue line, get a ton of assists, potential goals. Guys like Cole Makar in Colorado, he's the league's best at that. He's not a defensive liability. He's an average defender, but he really thrives on offense. Kind of plays the quarterback position on power plays and sets guys up and stuff like that. And uh, Carlson is one of those offensive defensemen. And that while I do think we need a defensive defenseman more than anything, we can't be too picky when trying to upgrade the roster. Like at this point in time, no one that is going to make a sizable difference is available in free agency. So trade is the only way at this point in time to significantly improve the roster prior to the season. And if Carlson's just the best one that's on the market, it's still an upgrade. He would easily be a top three defender on this team in totality as a player. He would easily be number one in terms of offense for our defensemen. But unfortunately, he is a defensive liability, and he is oftentimes too aggressive on offense, which puts him out of position on defense and can give away breakaways and stuff like that, which is why Pittsburgh, frankly, is willing to shop him. He's also pretty expensive, but I would assume that with the deal there would be money retained. So Pittsburgh would pay some of the money. We take on whatever other portion of the contract. He's getting paid 10 million a year, so hopefully, if we make a deal, I'm hoping Pittsburgh retains at least five, so the Wings only have to pay five. But he would be a significant upgrade in terms of 5-on-5 scoring as well as the power play unit. So I would be all over that with money retained. I would not touch him for 10 million if Pittsburgh's like, no, we want this whole contract off. Yeah, I would just say no, sorry, call someone else. But yeah, like I was getting pretty hyped on it because it was pretty big news on Twitter 3 or 4 days ago. But like I said, since that day, I haven't heard a whisper. I haven't heard a peep. No one's even mentioned it. So I don't know if the trade talks are dead or what's going on with that situation. But I would hope that something would manifest with that, just because, like I said, he would increase the it would be a win now move. He is older. I think he's 34 or 35. He's up there with Patrick Kane, but I've been begging the Wings to do a win now move, and that would be a win now move. So, and actually, I think that he might be enough to push us into that playoff bracket. So, I mean, I would love to get something done, but like I said, I haven't heard anything lately on that. And then the only other thing with the Wings I wanted to touch on was I'm intrigued, and I'm not going to go in depth to this because I just remembered that it happened when you mentioned the new CBA for the NBA. But the Players Union and the NHL have also agreed to a new CBA, which I do find, I'll say, amusing at this point because it seems like those two leagues are just bound together at this point. Their free agency started days apart. Their drafts were literally one day after each other, and now their CBAs come out in the same week. Um, the CBA for the NHL was not due to expire until after next season. So I'm not sure if the new rules, because there is plenty of adjustments coming, if not now. I just am unsure at this point if those new rules apply now or apply to when the last CBA ends. Because there is some significant changes coming in terms of contracts and length of terms and stuff like that. Because as we sit here now, and I'm sure you've seen, me retweet or whatever on X, there's some 8, 9 year deals going on in the NHL. And the new CBA limits that to, I believe, 5 if it's with a new team or 6 if you're retaining your own player. So they are limiting your contract terms on the length of contract. Too many people were, I guess, adding um, I don't quite want to say phantom years, but a couple years to the end of the deal so they can smooth out the money to avoid some cap situations, and then the player retires and then they only get the guaranteed portions and blah blah blah. So they are trying to limit that, but once again, I'm like, I'll get a little bit more in depth next week when I have more details. But I don't know if that applies right now or after once this is signed. So either way, it's going to be pretty significant coming up within the next year on that.
Okay.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know
you're
what was
good.
going on. I think my computer froze for a second and it would not let me unmute. So, with that being said, we will now move on to another shorter segment, the Lions. We don't have too much to talk about, unfortunately, on the Lions right now. There is just not a lot going on. It is the dead season for football, as we've said for the last few weeks. However, we do have something that just dropped, the quarterback show on Netflix. Now, I'm assuming most of you guys have watched the show, so I'm not gonna, I haven't even watched the whole thing, okay? So there's not going to be many spoilers. There's not going to be nothing like that. I mean, it's about the season we already watched. So I don't think it really matters, okay? Point being that I think there have been a lot of changes of heart, at least. Maybe not changes of mind, but changes of heart when it comes to Jared Goff due to the show. I know for a while people called me a Jared Goff hater. Look, man, I don't give a fuck really what people say anymore, to be honest, because they just say shit to say shit. Like if if the person who called me a Jared Goff hater actually paid attention to what I say, they would know that I was one of the only people that was like, how the fuck did we get Jared Goff on top of all that? I was like, we got all of this and a starting level quarterback. And I remember, I'm sure I've mentioned this on the show, I did a hour and a half film breakdown of Jared Goff from college to the NFL every year. And I was like, we might have something here, okay? Now, I've also been very honest about his shortcomings. So that's part of the reason why, people will call me a hater, which is understandable. Now, Jared Goff, I've always loved him as a person. I've always loved him like as the guy, Jared Goff. I still always thought that, he's a top 15 guy. I don't know if he's top 10. I would say he's top 10 now. I don't know if I would say top 5 though. So, point being that the show isn't going to change your mind on that, but what it can do is make you go, man, I just really like this guy. Like, he's just really likable dude, normal guy, beautiful wife. Like, he's got it going for himself, And a really cool thing, me and him share a birthday, okay? I don't know if I've ever mentioned that on the show, but we were both born on October 14th, okay? He was born in, 1987, though, so not the same year.
It's not that old.
I don't know. He's like 31, isn't he? He might not have been born in 1987, but I was just guessing that. But point being that it's always really cool that when my
94.
birthday. Oh, okay. So I was pretty far off. Shit. My bad. But point being that it's always really cool when my birthday rolls around. I can be like, "Hey, at Jared Goff, happy birthday, bro." But point being that if you didn't like Jared Goff before this, you love him after. It really kind of encapsulated the emotion, that we felt last year as, Lions fans. Like I said, I haven't even finished the show, but I just got done watching episode 4, which is like when we just blew out the Cowboys and the Titans back to back, and it just brought me back to that feeling like I'm sure everybody remembers 2 years ago when we played the Cowboys and we lost on some bullshit, and of course. And then we came back to Jerry World and stuck it to him and beat him by fucking 40 points. So that right there was probably it's up there in my favorite games of the year with the 2 games that I went to. So it's like you can see how much of an impact that game had on me. I was just you couldn't tell me shit for 2 weeks, man. I was just fucking rolling. I'm like, oh, what? What the fuck did the Cowboys fans bitch ass say? All right then.
The Cowboys game was such a bittersweet moment, I think, for all Detroit fans. Because as you mentioned, the year prior was the Decker not reporting situation that cost us the game. And then we stomp a mud hole in them on Jerry Jones's birthday. We beat him by 40 whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the unfortunate double-edged sword of that was the game Hutch got hurt.
Yep.
So if it wasn't for that Hutch injury, that might be my favorite Lions Day of all time.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. That's very valid because that's the negative about that whole thing is it was great, and then that happened halfway through the third quarter, so we were already blowing them out, and it was just like the the life left my body when I saw that happen. I was just like, well, I don't even want to watch football again ever. I was just like, I don't know what to do with myself. So I think I will say it was kind of odd to me that they never mentioned that in the show. And that's one thing I will say off the Jared Goff specific topic here. I think the show doesn't do a great job with like the NFL storylines themselves, right? Because as a Lions fan, like there was moments in these games that they didn't show, and then there was other moments that they did show, and I'm like, that had way less importance than the thing I remember, and you just didn't even fucking mention it. So they kind of do a weird storyteller vibe on that show, but it's still a great show. Um, and point being, it was also really cool. My favorite part so far about that show was the when they showed the trade, right? When they showed like Goff's talking about the Rams before, which it seems he's still pretty bitter about that whole situation, I will say, which he has every right to be. But it was like they showed, Goff's thoughts about the trade when it happened. They showed like Brad Holmes talking about it. They showed Dan Campbell talking about it, and like it just brought back all those memories because I'm one of those people. I try not to think about the past too much, right? I try not to dwell on things, but it's like I really forgot how big of a deal that trade was when it happened. Like when that went down, it was like holy shit. Where are we going to go from here, And as we saw, we went up. We went up like the house in the movie, baby. Cuz we are flying high. You know what I'm saying? It's like and now we're to the point where we're the best team in the well, one of the best teams in the NFC, one of the best teams in the NFL. So it's just an amazing like feeling as a Lions fan to be able to go back and look at those moments and be like, when that happened, we had no idea we would get Jahmyr Gibbs, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, Jack Campbell, whatever the case may be. We had no idea that's how that was going to go down. We had no idea we were going to win our first playoff game. And I'll tell you what, watching that on that show was like, it was amazing because it brought back all those memories, man. Like that, I just bought my house like a month before that. And I had just built out my man cave, and I was sitting down there watching the fucking Lions win a playoff game. Like, that was a total different feeling for me as a person. And to rewatch that on the show was like, it was really cool to kind of bring back all those emotions and, the thoughts that I felt in that moment. So, with that being said, the next thing, and probably the last thing about the Lions that we have is the Amon-Ra St. Brown jersey situation. Like, apparently, he says it on the show that he wanted number 16 because that was the number of receivers that were drafted before him. But he wanted the number, whatever number it was, of the receivers that were drafted before him. His girlfriend got it wrong, so he picked 14. But regardless, he couldn't have got 16 because of Jared Goff. Now, with that being said, I will say, and I said this before, hey, I find it a little corny. I'm not going to lie. It's a little corny. It's like, all right, bro, we fucking get it. 16 guys were drafted before me. It's like, do you think Tom Brady was fucking sitting there like, there was 27 quarterbacks drafted before me? No, probably not. And that's what I'm saying is it's like, I get it because that is Amon-Ra. That's who he is. That is like, that's his greatness. You know what I mean? So I'm not like mad about it, but it's just like, I thought it was cool the first time, And you made a good point before the show, James, when we talked about this a little bit. It's kind of like the Matthew Stafford, Clayton Kershaw thing. It's like people just say it now just to fucking say it. Like it's not even Amon-Ra anymore really bringing this up, so it's not really necessarily his fault, but it's just like now when I hear it, I'm just like, yep, okay, we got it. 16 receivers. Can we fucking shut up, please? Like, holy fuck. And you made a good point before the show as well that it's like, well, it was his girlfriend that brought it up on the show and everything, and it's like, yeah, for sure, that makes sense. But at the same time, I'm kind of overhearing it, to be honest, because it's like every fucking player, unless you're the number one overall pick, could sit there and talk about this. Oh, I was 7th overall pick, and I had 6 guys drafted before me, and I had their name tattooed on my arm, and it's like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? Like, cool, move on. Like, I don't know. But pass it over to you if you have anything to add before we move on.
No, not really, because like you said, you mentioned my pre-show comments, but I would find it interesting if you asked Brady, because he was pick 199. Be like, do you know the 198 guys taken before you and pulls out a list, just
Right? He just got a scroll in his pocket. He's like, matter of fact.
I think there were 6 or 7 just quarterbacks taken before him, and there was I don't know if it was a 30 for 30 or there was something on that, but obviously they weren't Brady. But
Right.
no, just in totality, I love the show so far. Like you said, I do find it interesting the moments that they do select to use, but I love anything football. I don't care if they're just sitting on the couch at home when they're reading their play sheet. I don't know if you got to that episode or not. And Goff's wife, I'm spacing on her name right now, had the play sheet, and she was just reading off, the long huddle calls. And then he was repeating them back, and they were just going through memorization. And I'm like, even something like that, I find entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much anything to do with football, but the show does a really good job with behind the scenes. Um, so although they didn't select some of the moments we may have wanted to see, it's still a very entertaining watch in my opinion.
Yeah, it for sure is. It's still very entertaining. I was more just saying it's kind of odd how they decide to configure the story when it's like they didn't even mention the fact that Hutch got hurt, like ever. They didn't say it one time. Like it was all just positivity. And I think that's part of the problem, or not part of the problem, but part of the reason that they do that is they want to keep it positive unless they're like showing something negative so that then they can redeem it later kind of situation. But I also think that, for lack of a better term, I think that's a little bit lazy because it's like, oh, we don't want to give them too many emotions because they'll get confused on what they're supposed to feel and all this shit. So it's like, it's still very entertaining. And I will say, I love, like, kind of off topic, but I love the Kirk Cousins part of it because I know a lot of people were like, we don't really need another Kirk Cousins quarterback, which I get. I mean, I was thinking the same thing going into it. I'm like, we saw it one time. Do we really need to see Kirk Cousins on this fucking show again? And it was cool. And a lot of it was cool because of the fact that the Falcons took Penix and then benched Kirk for Penix, even after all, like, like, he had 509 yards on Thursday Night Football. And that was the Atlanta Falcons record. And then he got benched like 4 games later. So it's just kind of cool to see that too and see how he dealt with that. Like when it comes from, his Achilles rehab all the way to playing the first game with the new team to like explaining why they left and all that. I find that very entertaining as well. I will say almost more entertaining than the Jared Goff stuff. And that's just because we watched it. You know what I mean? Like it feels like watching the TV show that was made about a movie that you've already seen, is if that makes any sense. It's like they made a Harry Potter TV show. It's like, yeah, I'll watch it, but the whole time you're kind of thinking back on, the movie was better because of this.
Like
or
what's
this.
going to happen, the premise and
exactly. So
the one thing I will say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I find that to be a little more entertaining when I don't know it. So that's why I like the Kirk and the Burrow stuff a little bit more.
I do like the Burrow stuff, and I watched the first, I think, 3 episodes completely. I think around episode 4, I did start fast-forwarding through the Kirk Cousins parts because I'm like, dude, I know you get benched. I know it might be interesting once I get to that part, and maybe I fast-forward through it when he's officially benched. But I did find like the Burrow thing interesting. He's just a good quarterback, obviously dealing with all that stuff. But I did find it intriguing how maybe I'm reading too much into it, but in episode 1, I feel like they kind of slapped the city of Detroit / the Lions in the face a little bit. Because they were trying to make all 3 quarterbacks kind of sound like an underdog story. They're like, Joe Burrow just went through wrist surgery on his throwing hand. Kirk Cousins is dealing with his Achilles, and Jared Goff is traded to Detroit. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, that's valid. And the only thing I would say about that is I didn't necessarily get that vibe when I watched it. I more just got the vibe of like, these are 3 guys going through a big transition. And I feel like it would have looked a lot better 2 years ago. I think they waited a little too long to do it because if you're trying to make Jared Goff an underdog right now, it's kind of fucking hard. Like you can't really do that, Yeah. And like I get it to where it's like, okay, we're trying to make a story where all three guys are going through a similar situation. So they kind of brought it all the way back to 2021 when he first got traded and all that shit. And I get it because they're just trying to make it fit in the mold. Because let's be real, man. The reason they had Kirk Cousins again, it's not because they wanted Kirk Cousins, I bet. It's probably because most of the guys they wanted said no. So when you get three guys and it's like,
Oh,
okay,
absolutely.
Joe Burrow just had his injury, Kirk Cousins had his injury, then they're like, how can we fit Goff into this? Because he is not coming off of a poor. I mean, they didn't know it yet, but well, I guess they did know it, but he did just lose in the NFC Championship game after being up by what 24 or 17 points a half. So they could have said that, but then you're kind of, you know. Anyway, um,
Yeah, I'm not looking
point
forward to
being,
I'm guessing the last episode to Washington. I'm not looking forward to that part.
yeah, that's
We'll
the
get
thing
there.
too is I don't know if I'm gonna enjoy that part too much. But that
Although I
being
will
said,
say,
go ahead.
I was unaware of his ankle injury against Tennessee because it was the very next game that in Houston where he had that 5 interception game. And although, of course, we did win that, um, but and he's one of the things that also makes him classy. He's not going to blame his ankle, but he was limping. You can see all the behind the scenes stuff that he was trying to do, doing all the extra prep, the massages, the cold presses, etc., etc. Like, I'm not saying he threw 5 interceptions because of his ankle, but it of course didn't help.
Yeah, and that's a great point because that's actually the next thing I was gonna say was that like I honestly had no idea he was even really hurt. Like I'm sure I remember seeing him twist his ankle a little and being all, I'm sure I was like, oh fuck, and then he came up the next play and I was like, oh, he's fine. You don't really,
Yeah,
and I'm a football coach, so I should probably think about that a little more often. But when you're watching pro athletes, like if they fall on the ground and then they get back up, you're like, oh, he's fine. I mean, maybe he's not. I mean, he might be able to keep playing, but he's probably not 100% anymore. So, that's a good point with the 5 interception game that I'm sure that did nag him. But at the same time, like you said, he didn't really even let it be known it was nagging him.
yeah,
So, as fans, it was hard for us to even really understand what was going on with him until we watched this show, which is a really cool part about it when you see the insights, when you see the background stuff like fucking I'm sorry, bro, but Kirk Cousins going to only great clips is the most
I did
like
see that.
that
Yeah,
shit is so
yep.
funny to me, bro, because it's like everyone knows they give shitty haircuts. And this dude is making fucking 40 something million a year for the past like 5 seasons. And he's like, $18.99 haircut, I'll take it. Like, what the fuck? And then you see him, like, I'm sorry, but you see him fucking sitting there reading a magazine in the waiting room as if he does that regularly. And then he fucking walks up there and she's cutting his hair, has no idea who he is. Like he went to the drive through place or whatever, and the girl had no fucking idea who he was. And I
She
was
was a
like,
Saints fan.
yeah, I'm like, if you were a Saints fan, you'd know who Kirk Cousins was, buddy, because he plays
Yes.
against your team. Like, come the fuck on. So I thought that was really funny personally. The whole great clip situation is just so Kirk Cousins. Like, that's just a dude from Holland, Michigan. Like, you can just tell he's not a true celebrity. You know what I mean? He's just a guy who happened to play football at a high level. So with that being said, though, we will now move on to our final piece of the podcast, our Tigers update, roundup, whatever you want to call it. Before we move on to that, though, there is 70% off currently on Fanatics for Detroit Lions fans, and I'm sure other teams as well are also included in this deal. 70% off. I think it's for like a day or two. So, link in the description. Click that link. Go buy your shit. Enjoy it because it will not be that cheap again for a long time. As well as trytheworld.com. Said it before. It's pretty simple. You buy a box from a country, they send you the snacks, you eat them, you buy another box from a different country or the same one if you want, but you can pick any country you want, and the link is in description. Go ahead and click that link and get to snacking. So with that being said, though, we will now move on to our Tigers segment. James, the floor is yours.
Per usual, the Tigers are red hot, and a part of me Um, wants to say I'll never get tired of saying that, but at the same time, I feel like the last 4 or 5 podcasts, I'm just repeating myself. It's great. I mean, obviously, I hope we continue. We are on a currently on a 5 game win streak, which is tied for our longest of the year. And if that, see, I can't say a stat is a cop out, but it is our fourth 5 game win streak of the year. So it's technically tied, but I'm just like, it's not uncommon that we've had 5 game win streaks, which is nice to have. We just keep rolling. Our prospects are rolling. Our main 3 prospects have just been called up to Double A from Single A, making one step closer to their MLB appearances. Still probably a year away, or I should say, if we keep them, which is probably a lackluster but necessary segue into what ESPN had as a possible. Once again, no calls are being made. It was just ESPN talking, but I have to bring it up because it's been a talking point. It's mostly a like what would you do it slash what if, and it has the Tigers acquiring Paul Skeens, the starting pitcher from the Pittsburgh Pirates, for all 3 of those main prospects, or I'm sorry, actually just 2 of them, McGonigal and Clark, who are both top 15 prospects in all of baseball, not just the Tigers organization, but all of baseball combined, all 32 teams. We have 2 of the top 15 prospects. In addition to Jackson Jobe, who was the number 1 prospect in last year's prospect pool, because he was with the Tigers in the playoffs last year and at the start of this year, he loses his prospect status, but he's only played a handful of games this year before his unfortunate injury. But he was the number 1 prospect in all of baseball last year. So between him and our other 2 top prospects would be the main selling points to go get Paul Skeens. And for those who are not familiar, Skeens is the best pitcher in baseball not named Tarek Skubal. He is uh, Pittsburgh plays in the NL. He's basically the NL Skubal. His stats are second to none in the NL. He is below Skubal, but that's not a knock on the guy. I mean, Skubal's just, well, you see him. And they were basically saying by trading players that aren't on the main roster and acquiring a pitcher that is Scooble-esque, I will say, like damn close. I would say 95% of Scooble. Having him and Scooble will give us that tipping point, especially in the playoffs when, as I mentioned before in prior podcasts, you switch from a 5 man rotation to a 3, maybe a 4, so that way you get your better pitchers. Although more taxing, it's playoffs, do or die, and you'll get your better pitchers more starts. So having 2 guys of Scooble's level will be a significant advantage come playoff time. So that is what ESPN was talking about. However, I can almost guarantee this won't happen. The Tigers are, as I've mentioned all through these podcasts, the best team in baseball right now as is. Adding Skeens would be tremendous for our main roster. However, why, when we're already the best team in baseball, would we potentially sabotage our future by giving away so many top-notch prospects? And while it's true, not every prospect pans out. I know at one point in time, Torkelson was considered like that can't miss guy. Don't get me wrong, he's obviously amazing this year, but he had those ups and downs over the last 2 years. So these amazing guys like Matt Clark and Kevin McGonigal might come up here in a year or two and might have up and down seasons. You don't know if they're gonna still be all stars because they are playing at an all-star level. They won't be in the minor league all-star game since they switched levels, and they each level has their own games, but that doesn't really matter. But I just don't know why we would kind of do that all-in move. That would kind of be like if Minnesota traded for like Mahomes. Like you get that top-notch guy and kind of the final piece to the puzzle because you have all the other things, but it would cost you like 10 first-round picks. And it would be like, do you really want to deal with that, down the road and stuff when you're already good as is? And I feel like that's a fair example because Minnesota, as much as I hate them because they're division rivals, they're a 14-win team as they were. So
Yeah.
I don't see
Honestly,
that.
like it kind of makes me like it reminds me of if the Lions tried to like trade for Saquon Barkley. You know what I mean? It's like we already are really good there. And it's like, yeah, it'd be really cool to have another guy that's good, but with what you have to give up to get him, it just doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of the entire, team. Like, or it'd be like the Lions going and trading for another wide receiver. It's like, yeah, it kind of makes sense, but it's like, does it? Like at the end of the day, you know?
I will say we do need starting pitching, especially with Joe going down with an injury. But this is just like I said, he's top talent, so he would require a deal like that if he gets traded.
Hmm.
But I don't know why Pittsburgh would want to trade him. Also, we are, and we've mentioned it on the podcast before, struggling to re-sign Scooble. He's going to be super expensive. Our owner's cheap, and Scarns is only, I think, 2 years um, left on team control. So between Scarns and Scooble, you literally might be talking about $1 billion between those two contracts. They might be two $500 million contracts right there. So if we are struggling with one, I doubt we're gonna do two. Um, but like I said, I at least get the talking point. It's an all-in move, but it would cost a shit ton. And in terms of like the Lions comparison, I would, because we already have Gibbs and Montgomery, I'd almost more compare it to like I heard T.J. Watt potentially might be on the block for a huge package. So I'm just like, maybe it would be closer to that just because, yeah, like we can use another pass rusher on the other side of Hutch, but once again, what cost? Also,
Hmm.
cap and, a little bit different there. But one thing I did also want to talk about and touch on is there have been calls made between the Tigers and the Pirates about a trade. However, it has nothing to do with Scarns or Skeens, Scarns. Either way, we're not getting him, so I don't need to learn his name. But pretty sure it's Skeens.
It is Skins.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And then the third baseman is about. Oh, let me get his name. I only wrote down his last name for some reason. I only have his last name. Hayes. Their third baseman. He is a below average hitter. He's not terrible. He's batting 240. His OPS would be the worst on the team, so he's almost a consistent, just a single guy. He doesn't have much power. I think he only has 2 home runs on the whole season. So he's just like a singles, dink and dunk kind of guy on offense. On defense, he is the best defensive third baseman potentially in the whole league. So I am curious because I haven't heard anything about what it might take to get him because of his, I'll say, lack of offense. I don't think he's going to be super expensive. I don't think we'd have to give away one of our top prospects or anything like that. But we would gain literally a Gold Glove caliber third baseman. I wanted to pull up Brian Hayes, that's his name. I wanted to pull up this screenshot I have of him here because there are three players for defensive outs above average leaders, which if you don't like advanced metrics and sabermetrics, this won't matter to you. But for the second most in the league, this is runs, kind of like run saved or plays defensively that this player would make that the average player would not have made. So the league takes like this fictitious average player, and if the ball was hit this many feet away from him, would they make it or not? There are three players tied for the second most plays like this in the league, with 4. Emmanuel Rivera from Baltimore, Ernie Clemente from Toronto, Brent Batty from the Mets, all have +4 ratings in this stat. Brian Hayes, the guy we are talking about, and reports said the Tigers did make calls to them, so it's at least an official report, has a +13 in this stat. So second place is 3 guys at +4. He is a +13. So he is literally 3 times better than the second best third baseman in the league defensively. So while his bat is lackluster, and I've seen Tigers fans in the comment section saying, "Why the hell would we get this guy?" I don't know if they're just box score watching or what, because yes, his offensive numbers aren't that great. He's also not terrible. We do have Parker Meadows in center field who's batting under 200, and Hayes is at least batting 240. Nothing to write home about, nothing to brag about, but it's at least positive. It's at least something. With that being said, I would say Parker Meadows, in my opinion, is the best, if not the second best defensive center fielder. So at least he provides, I don't want to say talent, a value there. So I don't know how much it would take to get Hayes, but I would not dismiss it the way that a lot of Tigers fans pretty much automatically did, because it was pretty much unanimous in the comment section saying that the players don't want this guy. And I get that McKinstry's playing awesome. I get that Baez is playing awesome. He's made a few. They both made handfuls of start at third baseman. It would be nice to have that third baseman that is just day in, day out, plug and play. You don't have to worry about it. Baez obviously can play shortstop. McKinstry's played right field, shortstop, second base, first base. So I'm like, we can find positions for these guys when they're playing. So as long as the cost isn't too expensive, I would kick the tires on this. Unfortunately, unlike the trade for the pitcher, there has been no reported what we would give back. So if it was even just one of those prospect guys, I wouldn't. But if you're talking like a mid-range prospect, like number 7 or 8 in our farm system, I would probably do that just to get someone that can help us out today and now.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. You know, we are, like you've mentioned, a team that is the best team in baseball, and I don't know, like, if we're considered the far ahead favorites to win the World Series or not. But I would say we're obviously one of those teams that, you know, are favored, and if we added a guy like that, it would just, you know, widen that gap even more with the teams behind us or below us. So I do think it would be a good idea, but like you said before, we do need starting pitching, and, you know, like you mentioned with the Skubal situation, you never know what's going to happen there. So with that being said, though, that is going to wrap up the show for today. We appreciate you guys for watching, as always. We will see you guys back here next week. Not sure what day yet. It will be up in the air until the season rolls back around. As I've said before, I coach football, so I kind of work around my coaching schedule. But with that being said, we appreciate you guys for watching. As always, you can find me at JSoSweet, James at Gullet_James, both of us at MI Sports Media and at misportsmedia.com. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.